and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Nyambura and this is 100 on Books. I've not done a Maktaba Manenos in so long that I feel I need to reintroduce the series and then get into the books I'm going to be talking about. So Maktaba Manenos was inspired by Ray of Books. I'm going to share a link to her channel down below, and she shares books that she's currently checked out because she's a library worker and she reads a lot of library books. So I figured, why not? Because I also read a lot of library books. I figured it would be nice to do, like a local edition, like my own take on it. Anyway, some things are going to change. I feel like every time I come back with the Maktaba Manenos, I say some things are going to change at yes, some things are going to change. Hopefully over the next couple of weeks or months. I hope to start doing this weekly because I'd previously said I'd be doing this every 3 weeks, but it gets overwhelming, I'm not going to lie. Next is to have a maximum 5 loans per format. Generally, I don't talk about books which I've already talked about. Those I'll usually just list at the end. So in some episodes, it might just be one book a format or even no book in some formats because I've not borrowed anything new in that format in the intervening week. And then I'm going to be sharing the lower price for hybrid reads. Previously, I would share the total price, but now I'm just going to share the lower price because I'd probably just buy the cheaper version, say which is usually the ebook version. With that in mind, even though I've traditionally shared the bookshop.org price, because that's usually a physical book and I'm more often than not reading ebooks, I want to represent as much as possible the format in which I'm actually consuming the book, and more often than not it is an ebook format, with the exception of the physical books I'll be sharing today. So then, seeing as I'm reading them on my Kindle, I'll share the Kindle price as much as possible. And that's it. Now, let's get into it. With this round, and hopefully with future rounds, I'll be sharing the books by author surname. So that's what's going to influence the order in which I'm going to be talking about them. So the first of those is Layla by Prayag Akbar. This one. I'm going to put a picture up here just so that it's clear. I borrowed it from the Bookworm Gigiri here in Nairobi. I joined it last year, and for those who are wondering, membership is 500 shillings a month. That's 1,500 shillings a quarter. And if you pay a 4,000 deposit at the top, it gets you 2 books at a time, which is what I have. I'll talk about the other book I borrowed later on. And I've talked about it actually in a roundup, so I'll share a link to the precise timestamp where I discuss it down below. Then the next book I have borrowed is Unexpected Stories by Octavia Butler, read by Robin Miles. This is a collection of short stories by Octavia Butler which had previously been unpublished. So I'm really looking forward to listening to them because I absolutely love Octavia Butler. Next is Pastry Love, a baker's journal of favorite recipes by Joanne Chang, which I first heard about via e-viewings Instagram. The writer, poet, and professor etc e-viewings Instagram. I have talked about it before in a previous Maktaba Manenos, so I'm not really going to go into it, but just to talk a little bit about why I borrowed it. I'm in my baking era. My brother and I are in our baking era, and so the goal here is to find a few recipes that we can try. We're not really at home cook level, we are more at amateur level, so we're also hoping to find things that we can grow into and things that are easy for us right now. Next is A Sun to be Sown by Jean d'Amérique, translated by Thierry Kehu and read by Marie-Françoise Theodore, which is tagged as a brutal fable of poetry, desire, and blood, where the naivete of a young Haitian girl struggling against impossible odds collides with the unrelenting cruelty of the world. I think I found this via Goodreads. This is Goodreads comment sections are basically where I find a lot of suggestions, other than BookTube, of course. So I'm looking forward to listening to this. Then next is the Intimacy Experiment, which I started today actually. I'm recording this on the 3rd of April 2023. And It follows a sex worker who becomes a speaker at a synagogue, and part of the reason she's motivated to do this is because she has a crush on the rabbi. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing what it's like, and it's a second in the Shameless series by Rosie Dunnan. This book is read by Alex McKenna and Khalil Griffith. So yeah, so far so good. Next is Cont and Won't, stories by Lydia Davis. I actually have no idea how I ended up with this book. It might be that the other person who I share this card with borrowed it, but seeing as it looks interesting, I figured why not read it. Next is Rest is Resistance, a manifesto written and read by Tricia Harsey. Now, some of you may know her as the person behind the NAP Ministry, which has a Twitter account and Instagram and so on. And I struggle with rest, generally, like resting and not viewing it as a reward or as a way to recharge before I work again and so on. So I'm looking forward to some of the ideas that will come out of this book. The next book is The Divide, A Brief Guide to Global Inequality and Its Solutions by Jason Hickel. I found out about this book via my friend Brenda Gushu. I'm going to post a link to some of her internet presence downstairs. And she reads a lot of nonfiction and especially books around like how the world works, economics, sociology, and so on. So, I figured because she recommended it that I'd pick it up and try it out. So looking forward to reading that. Next is Yes to the City, Millennials and the Fight for Affordable Housing by Max Holleran. I picked this up because of YouTube, actually. I can't quite remember what video it was. If I can or if I find it, I'll post a link below. But I had a period when I was watching a lot of urban design, why is the cost of living so expensive, etc videos on YouTube, and this one was mentioned, so that's why I picked it up. Next is Teen Couple Have Fun Outdoors by Aravind Jayan. I think I've spoken about it in a previous video, but this was brought to my attention by Sean over at Sean the Book Maniac, and it's literally what it says on the title. This family is dealing with the fallout of the older of their two sons having a video of him having sex, or at least like being physically intimate with his girlfriend, being publicized like on the internet. So there's something about books set in India for me, as this is the second book set in India actually, because the first one is Layla by Prayaga, which I mentioned at the very top, and also like a book that contemplates something that's becoming more and more common. I mean, people who are filmed without their consent, revenge porn, etc. So I have already started this book, but I've not done a good job of reading it consistently, so I'm holding off on it, and basically the goal is to start again and then go all the way till the end. The next title is Indigo by Beverly Jenkins, read by Robin Ella. This is also a hybrid read. I don't know why I said also. This is the first hybrid read actually in this video. And I first borrowed it actually in February because of the Bubble Club over on Discord. It's hosted by M, who's also known as Zainab. I'm going to post a link to her blog down below, or their blog down below. And yeah, I've never actually read Beverly Jenkins, so I figured why not start there. It was supposed to be a February read because it's a month of love, etc. It's a historical romance, but we're in April. I'll read it eventually. Next is Indianish, Recipes and Antiques from a Modern American Family by Priya Krishna. We've only used one recipe from this book so far. We made a chickpea stew. We weren't huge fans. They were okay, right? Yeah, I'm talking to my brother off screen. They were okay, but in the end, we went back to our usual use of chickpeas, which is to make hummus. And yeah, still, I mean, she has some pretty interesting like recipes out and about. And I've talked about this particular book in a previous Maktaba of Manenos, because the thing that led me to Priya Krishna, actually, I said in that particular video, was her guide to how long to pressure cook different legumes, as my brother calls them. So yeah, she's also featured on NYT Cooking on the YouTube channel, if that's the sort of thing you're interested in. So yeah, she knows her stuff, and I hope we can try out some recipes before we send it back to the library. Next is Sightseeing by Ratawut Lapcharansap. I need to finish these stories, and as with teen couple have fun outdoors, I'll just have to start again from the beginning. I suspect Don, I'll put a link to his internet things downstairs, is the one that led me to it, but he might have given up along there, or I might have given up along there, but anyway, I'm going to read this book at some point. Next is Very Cold People by Sarah Manguso. It's been called a masterwork on growing up in and out of the suffocating constraints of a very old and very cold small town. Another one of those, I don't quite know how I ended up with this book, might be the other person who shares the library card with me, but I still want to read this books. So there's that. Before I go on to my next book, if the light has changed, it's because the lights went out. Nigerians would say NEPA has taken the lights. But for us, KPLC has decided we don't deserve power, so here we are. So the next book I borrowed is Notes of a Crocodile by Kyomyo Jin, translated by Bonnie Hui, and this was my choice for my buddy read with MJ. I'm going to post a link to her Goodreads downstairs, as always. I was supposed to discuss this book with MJ on Saturday, which was the 1st of April, but I had not finished it because March is just a wild reading month for me for all sorts of reasons. But I hope to finish it this month. And this particular novel follows one girl as she contemplates like her relationship with another girl. So yes, it's a lesbian novel set in Taiwan, and she's trying to kind of figure out what happened, at least the part I've gotten to. And yeah, we like reading queer books in this house, so I'm looking forward to actually starting it afresh. This is a theme, actually. My hope is to just start novels afresh, because a thing I sometimes do is I get to the middle and I'm like, well, I was 60% in, I can keep going, and it's like, but you don't even remember what happened in the first 60%, and it's not that long a novel, so but I'm happy to start afresh. Next is Nimita's Place by Akshita Nanda. I picked this up at the Kenya National Library Services Nairobi Area Library. So I'm just going to call it the Nairobi Area Library going forward, because it looked nice. Like, look at that spine. Look at the back. I'm going to post an image here. Yeah, and it follows these two generations in a family of women who, for a host of reasons, either have had their dreams thwarted or who are trying to make a life for themselves in the world, in like independence time India and in 21st century India. And yeah, I love books set in India. I don't know if you can tell, there's a theme here. So I'm enjoying it. I'm currently reading it. I'm reading it slowly. I've already renewed my loan at that library. The loan period is only 2 weeks, so I'm in the 4th of my 4 weeks, and I hope to be finished before this week is done. I probably will be done because it's also Holy Week this week, and we don't take Holy Week off here in Kenya, but we get Friday, which is Good Friday, off, and we also get Monday, which is Easter Monday, off. So I intend to use Easter to read, so I anticipate I'll be done. Next is Welcome to Lagos by Chibundo Onuzo, read by Robin Miles. I'm reading it as a hybrid read. I wanted to read this book for a long time, and the thing that actually made me decide to read it instead of renewing it 100,000 times was that I saw that my friend Angie Moturi, I'm going to post a link to her profile down below, had a copy, and I was like, oh, it would be so nice to do like a buddy read together and so on. And it's described as a book that's full of shimmering detail, and it's a stunning portrayal of an extraordinary city and of 7 lives that intersect in a breathless story of courage and survival. So I'm really excited to read it. This is another one of those books where I have started it more than once, but I have not finished it. The next is Wandering Souls by Cecile Payne, read by Afa Hinz, Iona Kimbuk, and Ainsley Barber. I've been seeing it on Twitter a lot, and it's also on the Women's Prize long list. So I had added impetus to pick it up with that. And it follows these 3 Vietnamese siblings who seek refuge in the UK and turns into the description calls it luminous meditation on ancestry and love. It's a really short novel, but it packs so much into it, and it's really, really moving. Next is The Weekday Vegetarians, 100 Recipes and a Real Life Plan for Eating Less Meat by Jenny Rosentrack. This is a theme. Cookbooks. I don't think we've cracked open this cookbook, have we? We have not. But for a host of reasons, we are trying to eat even less meat than we eat. We consume a lot of legumes in this house. Like, we basically are vegetarian with instances of meat eating, which I think is the inverse of how a lot of Westerners, but especially Americans, seem to eat, which is a lot of meat with breaks to not eat meat, which is where like the idea of veganuary and things like those come from, like taking a break from meat. But for me, the reason I borrowed this is so that I'd be able to expand my repertoire of meals I can make that are vegetarian for myself, because as I said, we are pretty much a vegetarian household, but like sometimes you can end up in a rut where you're just making the same old beans and this dal and that dal and so on, and now getting into a mode where you can hopefully make more interesting, more exciting things with vegetables. Next is Seven Empty Houses by Samantha Schweblin, translated by Megan McDowell. Samantha Schweblin writes such creepy books, such unnerving books, and that's why I had to pick this up. I think I had borrowed the audiobook at some point, but then there was such a long queue and I never got to it, so I'm looking forward to this either way. The next book I have borrowed during this period is The Old Drift by Namwali Sapel. I'm going to post a picture up here. I have talked about it in a previous wrap-up because I have finished it. I've also talked about Layla in a previous wrap-up because I've finished it. And I'd borrowed the audiobook, but I finished it before recording this video, so I'm not going to count it in this calculation. And this book follows multiple generations of multiple families. It's chiefly centered in Zambia, but also goes to other parts of the world and really talks about a bunch of themes which I explored in that roundup, so I don't want to rehash it here, but I'll put a link to the particular roundup with the timestamp where I discuss the book down below. Next is The Empress and the Cake by Linda Stift, translated by Jenny Barlow. This is another one of those ones I picked up at the Nairobi area library. Oh, I forgot to mention The Old Drift is also from the Bookworm Gigiri, and this is from the Nairobi area library. I picked this up because of the cover and its state, because I hate to say this, but so often books are not in a good state at that library because they don't cover them. And so I don't know if you can tell, but this book is covered and this one is not. So even though some books might just have been newly added to the library, they fall apart pretty fast. Although for this book, I was the first one to borrow it. And I like that it has French flaps. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I love French flaps. So I picked it up because of the cover, as I said, and it says back here, madness lurks behind the pretty facade of everyday life. An elderly lady offers a young woman a piece of cake at a pastry shop. She accepts. The lady resembles the Austrian Empress Elizabeth and lives with her servant in an apartment full of bizarre souvenirs. More invitations follow. A seemingly harmless visit to the museum turns into a meticulously planned raid to steal a royal cocaine syringe. Without realizing, the young woman has become the lady's accomplice. Does she know she's losing control? And it's called a wicked psycho thriller that could only come from Vienna by Kultus Spiegel. And then next is Overground Railroad, The Green Book and the Roots of Black Travel in America by Candace Taylor. I talked about this book before in a previous Maktaba Manenos. I'm going to finish it at some point. It's another one I need to start from the beginning. But part of it I find is that I have no pressure to finish it, which is why I'm aiming at keeping things at 5, and 5 includes books which I've had for a long time. Like, I don't want to have more than 10 books total in audiobook plus ebook at a time. So even if it means sending books back when they are available until I'm at 5 and below per format, I'll do it. So the goal here is to mention fewer and fewer of these titles going forward. Although I think I've mentioned this in the past, in future videos I'll just say these are the ones I still haven't finished and these are the ones I've borrowed. So it's also possible that next week there'll be no video because maybe I will not have finished enough books to have to do a video or to do a video. Next is a hybrid read of Flights by Olga Tokarczuk, translated by Jennifer Croft and read by Julia Whelan. This book is described as reflections on travel with an in-depth exploration of the human body, broaching life, death, motion, and migration. I have never finished Tokarczuk. I have a copy of Driving the Plow Through the Bodies of the Dead. Do you know what? I'm going to put the cover here because I think I'm mangling the title, but I've never finished Tokarczuk. So I'm doing a hybrid read of this in the hopes that this will be my first Tokarczuk. Because she's won the Nobel Prize and here I am not having read her. I need to fix that. Next is The Theory of the Leisure Class by Thorsten Veblen. I once lived with a housemate who had a copy of this book and I remember thinking to myself, I really should read it. And I read a few bits of it over time, but I never actually sat down and read from beginning to end. If you're wondering why it says 0.00 under the price here, it's because this book is in the public domain. And technically, I shouldn't need to borrow it because I can get a free copy like from Project Gutenberg or whatever. And I actually did that while I was putting together the price of this book. When I went to look at the Kindle price, I was like, why is it 0.00? But that also meant that I bought it. I mean, I got a copy and put it on my Kindle. So I'll probably be sending this back to the library today just so that there's no pressure, but it's something I'm putting on my TBR either way. Next is On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden. I have started this graphic novel so many times. It features a ragtag crew that travels to the deepest reaches of space, rebuilding beautiful broken structures to piece the past together. And it has some queer elements, there's an non-binary character and so on. So it's a graphic novel I would actually enjoy, and I've read another title by Tilly Walden before. I'm going to put a photo of it here, and yet I have not finished. So that's another one that I need to start from the beginning and then actually finished. There's a theme here. Next is The Tragedy of Heterosexuality by Jane Ward, read by Dara Rosenberg. This is a book I wanted to read for ages because every time people make jokes about heterosexual squalor, I'm going to post a link to the Twitter thread that made heterosexual squalor a thing on Twitter. But yeah, every time it's mentioned, people talk about this particular title and say, hey, you know, you should read The Tragedy of Heterosexuality. And I've always thought to myself, yeah, I should. So it'll be nice to actually listen to it and sit with some of the ideas. And then lastly, it's a hybrid read of Year of the Tiger, An Activist's Life by Alice Wong. This is a memoir in essays, and it's by the editor of Disability Visibility, first-person stories from the 21st century, which I quite enjoyed reading because it drew all of these different experiences and yeah, really helped me understand some ideas about like disability rights and so on, but also question and affirm myself and so on. Like, it was just a good read overall. So yeah, those are 28 titles. Those are the books I have checked out right now. My total amount saved comes to $372.29. I should have mentioned earlier that with On a Sunbeam, I got the price of the publisher's site because the edition that's on Amazon.com is a sneak peek into the graphic novel. It's not the full edition. And then the other book, which I should clarify on, I forgot in the moment, is Nimita's Place, which is really, really expensive in the US. In a physical version, it's $70 or something like that. So the price I wrote is the current US dollar equivalent of the Great Britain pound or the pound sterling. But it's still quite expensive. Maybe it's out of print or something like that. And yeah, I look forward to talking to you soon. Please like, share, subscribe, and all the good things. Bye.